M42, it's heavy metals and other chemicals. On page 511, you need to know, how does lead get into the water from plumbing? We went over Flint, Michigan water, and that's a great example of how it gets in there. But no, there's different sources, different ways that it can get in. And then moving to the bottom, how does naturally occurring arsenic get into the drinking water? So it is naturally occurring. Also, it's put in there by man. But how does it naturally get into the drinking water? And then moving to page 512, looking up at this data, what general area of the U.S. are the lowest levels of arsenic found? So if we were looking at arsenic in the water, what areas would be the lowest, which ones would be the highest, and why? And then 513, know the sources of mercury in water, including cement. So cement is one of the ways that that mercury can get into the water. Also burning fossil fuels like coal. So the combination of burning fossil fuels to make cement is kind of one of the main reasons. But there's a couple others that mercury can get into the water from, and so know those. And then how does methyl mercury move up the food chain? And this is really important because just last week a study came out, or an article came out, that said that there's currently heavy mercury found in fish in Whiskeytown. And so they put major restrictions on the amount of fish or what fish that you should even be eating. And this commonly occurs. So this occurs in the ocean fish, it occurs in lake fish. There's always constant regulations on the amount, healthy consumption of fish. That has to do with mercury. And then the last one on 513, what precipitation form does acid deposition occur in? So it gets into the atmosphere through burning fossil fuels, and then how does it come back to Earth? What are all the different forms of precipitation, basically, that can occur? And then on page 514, what are ways that pH can be lowered in the waterways? So how can we lower pH naturally in the waterways? And then this picture shows acid mine drainage. It's not Iron Mountain, but it's very similar. So how does acid mine drainage affect pH? And I want you guys to think about what we've talked about with Iron Mountain. So that is very, very, very similar to this picture. And then the last thing on 514, how does acid mine drainage affect the iron content of water? So it does have to do with how much iron is in the water, but what does it do to the iron that's in the water when we have acid mine drainage? And then 515, what are some effects of using synthetic pesticides? So what does it do to our bodies? What does it do to animals when we use synthetic pesticides, which are basically spraying fields, not using manure, not using organic materials? And then the last section here, 516, in the opener case, it talked about the bay. And so I want you to think about why were the male fish growing eggs in their testes? So what was going on there? And what are we putting into water that may cause that? And then here you can kind of see in this diagram what kinds of pharmaceuticals we're using, what kinds of things that, maybe potentially go into the water source, and what those can do to those fish or other organisms. And then at the bottom, how does exposure to perchlorates affect the human body? So what is that? What does it do to our bodies? And then what are PCBs? What are they used for, and why are they bad? And then the last thing up here, how can PBDEs affect the human body? So this is something else that we add, a chemical add, and what do those do to our body? So how are those not good for us? And that's it for M42.